Rick Davies' site is Unmutual, dedicated to the classic television series The Prisoner, which starred Patrick McGoohan. And this is Sci-Fi Talk, the podcast on how sci-fi, fantasy, horror, and comics help us explore our humanity. As I mentioned in the episode, The Prisoner made an impact in my life, about the rights of the individual and maybe what freedom truly is. Rick Davies' site, Unmutual, keeps the spirit of the series alive with essays and news on events like prisoner location tours, and also what's new with the remaining cast and so much more. This is more of a primer on the series rather than a deep dive. But let's go now and relive The Prisoner. Hi, Rick. It's great to have you on the podcast talking about a show that, to me, as a young man, made a big impression, and that was The Prisoner back in 1967. So welcome.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. And same here. I first saw the show as a 10-year-old in the early 80s. It was being repeated here in the UK, and it's had a very lasting impression on me. No other series before or since has given us as much thought and as much to think about as The Prisoner has done. More relevant today, one could argue, with the political scene as it is around the world, than it probably has ever been before.
More with Rick Davies of Unmutual in just a moment. Absolutely. To give you a little more in-depth, I saw it. I saw it when I guess it had just aired in the UK, but every Saturday night when in the 60s, late 60s, Jackie Gleason would have his show, but he would go on hiatus for the summer. So they would usually show reruns or whatever. And this particular summer, they showed The Prisoner, first episode all the way through. And I was like engrossed by it. As a young man, I was very confused by the ending.
But, you're not alone. A lot of people have been. It's but that's the beauty of it, isn't it? Is that we can watch it again and again and try and get our own conclusions from what we see on the screen, rather than just be spoon-fed as other shows have done. I mean, Twin Peaks is probably the only other show that comes to mind that really makes you think, and you have to rewatch everything, and then you're still not fully sure. I was interested the other day when obviously David Lynch passed away. I saw a great quote. Somebody said, the worst thing about David Lynch passing away is he was the only guy that actually understood Twin Peaks, and now he's not here anymore. Yeah,
that's true. So true. The same could be said about Patrick McGoohan.
Yeah, you could argue that. But that, as I say, all of us can take our own conclusions from what we see on screen, and that's what makes it such a great show, is that we can all interpret it in our own way, and there's kind of no right or wrong answer. As long as we have an interpretation and we take something from it and can learn how to view the world in a slightly different way, then the show has done its job.
You have a great site, the Unmutual site. It's just really cool. I'll have the URL in the show notes of this episode.
So very kind of you to say so.
Oh, absolutely. I know how hard it is to maintain a site, having just resurrected mine a little bit recently. But the amount of information, I'll tell you what I really like are the essays that kind of take a deep dive into each episode or the different concepts the show talks about. The article is by James Dunn I really like. So there's some really good stuff on there for people that maybe they know The Prisoner or maybe they're just being introduced to it. It's a good way to get on board and learn about this very unique series.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's very kind of you. I think the whole idea behind it is that The Prisoner is such an important series that there needed to be something online so that people didn't have to, pay for stuff. They didn't have to go out and buy the books or join anything or sign up for anything. There was just a resource there for people to contribute to and write in their essays and articles, but also can take from if they want to. There's things there about the locations and about the merchandise and all the different aspects of fans in the series. I think it was important to have something there so that people didn't have to go and spend money and could contribute to as well. So people want to write in with an essay, it gets put up, whether I like it or not. I don't have to agree with what's being written. And again, what we were coming back to what we were saying earlier on, it's all about individual interpretations. So to be able to read others' interpretations is a really important way of viewing the series and changing your own perspectives.
It's actually Peter Dunn, not James Dunn.
Oh, right. Yeah. No, but yes, he's got a few pieces up there, and
yeah, I really like his stuff.
I do want him to finally finish. He was doing an A to Z of Prisoner Allegory, and I think he got up to about M and then stopped. I've been imploring him to try and finish the alphabet.
Yeah, I actually started reading the first part about the allegory, and the show obviously has allegorical roots. And we'll talk about that before we get into the episodes. Number 6 himself, how do you view him? What impression did he leave you with?
Well, I think what was interesting about number 6 and McGoohan's portrayal of number 6 is that if you examine him, he's not a massively likable guy. He's very angry. He's very rude to almost everybody that he comes across, even people that are trying to help him and be nice to him. He's very defensive. But then you put yourself in his shoes and think that we would probably be exactly the same. He represents every man. And I took him to represent that when I first saw the show as a 10-year-old. And it's how I still feel today. Now I'm in my 50s. He represents the part of all of us that wants to rebel, but can't because of the way society is around us. We all want to be ourselves and we all want to be individuals, but we're imprisoned by the society we live in. You can look at that on many different levels, and I'm sure we don't have time to go deep into every single one of those levels. But essentially, we are all prisoners of the world that we've put around us and the society that we build ourselves with, and the political systems that we work by. Even though we say we live in a democracy, do we really? It really has stayed with me since I first saw it as a child. This man, number 6, represents all of us in our individual struggles in life, whether that's a medical struggle, whether that's a political struggle, whether that's a struggle at work, whether it's just a struggle to get out of bed in the morning, whether that's a struggle to be yourself. He represents all of that, and it's a wonderful creation and a wonderful performance that somebody so almost unlikable can become the hero. And that's how I took it and take it today.
Great comments. He... To me, one of the strongest themes is individuality. I am not a number. I am a human being. And the famous, first thing he says to number 2 when he arrives, I will not be, I'm going to mess it up. But basically, he won't be briefed, debriefed, stamped, indexed, or numbered. And that is so powerful. Like here in the States, I have a social security number, so I am a number. To a lot of people, I am a number. So,
absolutely. And although you're an individual to yourself and to people that know you, you're really just a dot in the whole universe of existence. Really, you're to the political elite. You're a nothing. You're just one of the population or whatever. And I think what number 6 taught us to do was that we can be an individual and we can be important, even if it's in our own little world. We can each be important, and we need to stand up and be important. Otherwise, we become the faceless. We become the numbers. We become AI in a sense. We don't become the human beings that we really need to be.
It's just struck me as a young man, excuse me, watching the series, and made such an impression on me. Individuality, and it just seems even here in the States there's a quash to kind of bring down people being an individual and being who they are. And that's what a lot of what number 6 fought for, was to be able to have his own choices and to be able to be who he was. And I appreciate that. That's probably the strongest theme that I walked away from, even to this day, after first seeing the series.
Absolutely, and never better summed up than in the final episode when he supposedly is free, and he stands up in front of the chorus there and starts saying "I," and everybody just chants back I, and won't let him speak, won't let him be that individual. And he gets back to his. I don't want to give any spoilers away, but he then gets back to his home at the end of the door opens automatically. Just to give him that message of, you haven't escaped. No one ever escapes. You're always a prisoner.
I'll get into that a little more in detail. A character that is not does not have any speaking lines, but is so prominent in this series, in my opinion, is Port Marion itself. It's just the perfect place for something like this. I just really, really liked it.
It's an amazing place. I'm very lucky to live very close to it, so I spend quite a bit of time there. I spend a few weeks there each year on vacation. Nice. It is the most amazing place. Rather like the series itself, it's a patchwork of little bits of genius. In the same way that the series was, you get lots of different elements, like catching lightning in a bottle. You had McGoohan and you had his ideas and the writers and the music, and everything came together just in the right way. Port Marion is the same. A guy called Sir Clough Williams Ellis bought a piece of land and wanted to show that you could change a landscape without making it look worse. So he went around the world and collected various bits of buildings and built them all on this site. And I think that great patchwork of buildings that you get there was a perfect fit for Port Marion and a perfect fit for the prisoner, for what McGoohan wanted to do. Because you watch it, unless you actually know the place, you could be anywhere in the world. And that was the idea behind it, is this village could be anywhere, and is anywhere. I mean, it represents the village around us, whether you're in LA or in London or wherever. You're in your own personal prison, your own village, if you like. You think you're free, but you're not really. But Port Marion did bring so much to that. I'm sure we won't be talking about the Jim Caviezel remake of 2009. But then they didn't film it in Port Marion, and it showed, and you lost so much of the kind of the ethos of the series by not having it in Port Marion. Port Marion is intrinsically linked to the prisoner and has to be. It was such a big part of it. Now, I don't think it would have been quite the same series had it had been filmed anywhere else.
Now, 6 of 1 is another great organization that really keeps it alive. They have conventions there. Have you ever been to one of those at all?
I did many years ago. I'm not currently a member of the organisation. It's not for me, to be honest. But I did in my younger days go to conventions. I've organised a few in my time as well through the Mutual. We kind of were holding conferences in recent years at Elstree, which is where the series was originally filmed in terms of the studio wise. Because I've always, and this is not just for the prisoner. This is for anything. I think for a show that talks so much about being an individual, I've always found it odd that people then want to dress up as somebody else. So I've kind of always had that little thing in the back of my mind there that it's not really for me.
I hear you. I totally hear you. I liked the what they did. What was really cool was how they added things like the news stand with the tally ho, the speaker making daily PA announcements. The kiosks that were like the map of the village, the open phone booths, you could say, where people could make calls only in the village. You're free, but you can only go so far. I like that a lot.
Absolutely. It's kind of like a horror holiday camp where you're kind of, everything is bright and jazzy, and isn't it wonderful that you can be here in this community? But at the same time, underneath that, there is this essence that this is torture. Mm-hmm. And you see that in a lot of episodes, obviously.
So let's kind of get into them a little bit. Before we do that, in the I think it was the 80s or 90s, there was a PBS station, I think out in Seattle, here in the States, that was showing The Prisoner, and the guy that was the host, he dressed up, he had the outfit on and everything that number 6 wore, and he said, right down to the shoes, and he was talking about changing the order on which they were aired. And I actually videotaped all of the episodes and his commentary because it was so cool. It's not available anywhere. I don't even know if the gentleman's alive, but he actually started off, instead of Arrival, Chimes of Big Ben, because if you look at that episode, it looks like he is still getting acclimated to the village, and excuse me, I'm wrong. Not Chimes of Big Ben, because by then he seemed like he was way too acclimated. Dance of the Dead. He didn't seem like he was acclimated in Dance of the Dead. So so he started with Dance of the Dead, then Arrival, and then Chimes of Big Ben after that. Really interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if this is the same guy, but I've seen some things on YouTube. A guy called Scott Appel. I don't know if that was him.
I believe that is him. Yes.
Yeah. He did some interesting introductions. I think you always have to start with Arrival because you see him arrive and you find out the background. There are, on my website, I do have my own sort of personal viewing order, which in a narrative sense makes more sense than the order that it was shown on the television. And I have Dance of the Dead straight after Arrival because he is clearly new. He says he's never seen a night at one point, when in other episodes, of course, we see him doing things at night or whatever. So I think Dance of the Dead should follow Arrival straight away. I think they're a perfect kind of double act where in Arrival you find out why he's there. The Dead, you find out what the village are really up to. You're dead to the outside world. This is now where you will be for the rest of your life. And I think that only really works if that comes second. I can understand why they put it later on in the run, because they wanted to break up the episodes which had a lot of Portmeirion in it.
Yeah.
So if you do it narratively, more episodes are actually written as episode 2. If you have them as episodes 2, 3, 4, and 5, then the remainder of the episodes are all very studio, lots of indoor stuff, not much Portmeirion. So I can understand why they broke it up. But
my Prisoner retrospective with Rick Davey continues in a moment.
Yeah, Dance of the Dead has to come early. Great episode. That scene on the beach between number 6 in his tuxedo and number 2 dressed as Peter Pan, where they're talking about, this is your world. I like my world. What's that? Is that a star? Is that a boat? No, it's a flying fish. That piece of dialogue there is just absolutely astonishing and beautifully shot.
A great number 2. I mean, I loved her as number 2. And sadly, I think she passed not too long ago, but
she passed some time ago. I think she passed away in the early 90s, possibly.
Oh, okay.
There are only now 2 number 2 actors still alive. Darren Nesbitt from It's Your Funeral and
Yes.
Rachel Herbert, who becomes number 2 at the end of Free for All, are now sadly the only number 2 actors still with us.
Wow. I mean, Chimes of Big Ben. It's the first time he tries to escape, and it was really interesting. It had a lot of the elements of the spy drama to it, and then the twist at the end, of course. And then also there's a theme of you don't know who your friends are, and there's constant betrayal in the village. Not everybody seems who they are.
Yes, absolutely. That's very much the theme of that episode. And Leo McKern, I mean, his performance in that is great. What a wonderful actor. And obviously he does come back later on in the series. But he kind of makes that episode a lot better for him being in it. But a great episode. I never saw the twist coming at the end. When I first saw it, it completely took me by surprise. But yeah, it's a great episode, exploring paranoia, isn't it? About who you can trust and whose side are you on.
I actually got tried to get somebody else to do one of these, and they said, well, The Prisoner is not a sci-fi show. And I go, yeah, I agree, but there's elements of science fiction.
Oh, yes, there is lots.
And A, B, and C, I mean, you're talking about essentially, kind of going into a person's brain and bringing out memories, a little bit of brainwashing and a little bit of technology too. I like that episode. Again, it captured the spy element. Plus, we also saw a little bit kind of people he dealt with and who he knew. And I thought that was really interesting. Said a lot about him too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great episode to sort of find out a bit about who number 6 is and how he thinks and his moral code, and that comes across very much in the episode. But also what's interesting is you see a little bit more, which you don't get a lot of in The Prisoner, kind of the machinations of behind the scenes of workings of the village. So you see, number 2's paranoia about the big red phone and number 1 calling him up to kind of, tell him he's not got his job anymore. And one wonders whether when they lose their job, they lose a lot more than just their job, going by the fear that he has of that red phone ringing. But you get to see a lot more about how the desperation of the village, we really must try this, even though the doctor thinks it's very dangerous. And you're right, there's some great sci-fi elements. I think other than Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darling, this is probably the episode that has the most sci-fi in it. And it's to its credit, I think it's a great episode.
The other one that stands out to me as far as sci-fi, Man versus Machine, but the General. That was an excellent episode. And, number 6 feeds into the question. The one thing that human beings can't answer, and the computer was totally stumped. And that was all speed learning. Again, it was done, which is something we can't do now, to literally put that information in your brain. But I thought that was a great episode, and great McGoohan. That poor number 2. He just can't get a break with.
No, he doesn't have a lot of luck, does he? It's really interesting. You say no, we can't implant knowledge in people's heads, but with AI now, that foresaw so much about learning quickly and whether the information that you've got in your head is actually true or not, because it's just been fed to you in that way. Really, really interesting, and amazing to think that it's nearly 60 years ago that episode was written. It's just as relevant today now. Obviously, we get the big clunky computer at the end, that we can sort of fit that sort of thing in a matchbox these days. But you forgive that because it is just so prescient and so well done.
Yeah. Another one that, boy, this one really hit home, especially since we had elections here in the States, and that's when I watched it. Free for all. The feeling of an election, but it really wasn't an election. They picked number 6 to win, which I thought was interesting. And he also gives what I think is one of the most important speeches that number 6 does, the cabbages speech, I call it. Yeah. I thought that was a very key moment. And I really, really, that's one of my favorite episodes.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the first key moment, absolutely. And the second key moment is right at the end when he refuses to give in. He's been through all of that, and then he gets physically beaten at the end. And then she says, "Are you ready to talk?" And he just looks up and gives that look as if to say, I'm never going to talk. And those two moments kind of sum up who number 6 is. He's trying to rally against everybody. He's not getting anything back, but he still doesn't give in. Yeah, I mean, McGoohan wrote that episode himself, directed it himself. He based it on the general election that happened in Britain earlier that year. But you could base it on any election, couldn't you? And that line, "everyone votes for their dictator," is incredibly resonating with regards to what's happening in lots of countries in the world at the moment.
Oh, yeah. Hammer into Anvil, I think, is fun to watch because he literally drives number 2 crazy.
Oh, and an amazing performance by Patrick Cargill as number 2. And amazing to think that breakdown scene at the end was actually the first scene that he shot on the entire episode, which shows what a great actor he is. But no, it's great fun. It's wonderful. It's just wonderful psychodrama in itself. It doesn't really have a lot to do with the rest of the series, does it? You don't really learn anything new about number 6. He doesn't try to escape. Number 2 doesn't try and find out why he resigned. But it's just wonderful, wonderful episode. One of my favorites and one of, I think, everybody's favorites.
Schizoid Man, I mean, that was very interesting, getting a double to impersonate number 6 and challenge number 6 that way. I thought that was really interesting. And of course, he comes out on top. But I really, really, I like that one a lot.
Yep, I enjoy that episode as well. It's got a really nice guest cast. And again, a bit of sci-fi elements in there. What sci-fi series doesn't have a doppelganger episode? You see it in Star Trek, a very early episode. Is it called Enemy Within? I think Kirk gets a double of himself. You see it in lots of other sci-fi series as well. But it works particularly well in The Prisoner as a way of trying to break number 6. And a nice episode.
Another escape episode, Many Happy Returns. I look at this episode, really well done, and I come away with just one line: never trust a delivery man.
Absolutely. It's him all along, isn't it? When I first saw the series, we were talking about episode orders earlier and how they can make sense or cannot make sense. When I first saw the series, Many Happy Returns was the episode that was shown second after Arrival. And when we think about that now, that doesn't make any sense. But when you're 10 years old and you're watching this series for the first time, boy, that episode absolutely blew me away. No dialogue for the first act, 20 minutes with no one saying anything. And then you get another 10 minutes where the only people that speak are gypsies speaking Romany. A wonderful episode. Again, I didn't see that coming at the end because I didn't spot that the milkman delivery guy was the same guy as the pilot, but who would? Wonderful episode. brilliantly directed. Again, McGoohan directed that one himself. Wonderful, wonderful episode. And originally written to be kind of the end of series one. If there was going to be several series of The Prisoner, that was going to be the end of series one. But as we know, it didn't work out that way, and only one season was made in the end.
Living in Harmony is not one of my favorites, but somebody I think pointed out on a mutual, it was interesting to see how the British saw American Westerns, which I thought was interesting.
Apart from a comedy film called Carry On Cowboy, this Living in Harmony was the first Western to be made in the UK. I like it because I like it as an allegory of the entire series. Guy resigns, doesn't want to say why, doesn't want to wear a gun, doesn't want to do as he's told, wants to get away, can't get away, fights against the system. I like the fact that they've got the series captured in one episode in a different scene. I didn't like it when I first watched it, but I've grown to love it over the years.
Checkmate had one of my favorite number two, Peter Wingard. And what was interesting is normally we don't get to see what number two is doing when they're not looking after number six. But with him, he was doing his karate, which probably is for his mental well-being and everything else, when he gets interrupted about the latest antics of number six. But I'll tell you, that was an interesting episode on how the many techniques the number twos used to kind of thwart number six. And in this case was convincing him that he was being betrayed by somebody close. And then that person convincing them that they were being betrayed by number six. I thought that was, that's one of my favorite episodes. And, it also an allegory for the chess game that's going on in the village.
Absolutely. It's always the episode I say to people sums up the series best because it's got all the elements of The Prisoner within it. It's got an escape attempt. It's got allegory with the chess game, as you say. It's got a great number two. It's got lots of Portmeirion. It's, you see Rover. It's got things about betrayal and trust. It's got all the elements that make The Prisoner what it is, all captured in one episode.
There's two I'll talk about because Do Not Forsake Me and The Girl Who Was Death, to me, were obviously done when he was shooting Ice Station Zebra and was not available all the time. In The Girl Who Was Death, the scenes of him driving around was obviously a body double, and there was a body double in the amusement park as well. So that was interesting. I like that.
That's why they had him dressed up as this sort of Sherlock Holmes costume, because it was easier to hide that it wasn't actually McGoohan in the costume; it was somebody else. These two episodes were written. Were two of the last four to be written. They had to do the last four in a hurry. McGoohan was away filming, so they had to write one episode where he wasn't in at all, another episode where they could make use of doubles. The Girl Who Was Deaf was based on an unused storyline that David Tomlin had written for McGoohan's previous series, Danger Man, or Secret Agent as it was known in the USA. And Do Not Forsake Me was hastily written by Vincent Tilsley, who had previously written Chimes of Big Ben. I love them because they offer something different.
Yep.
Do Not Forsake Me has some great music in it. It has some lovely unused footage from the opening sequence, which I like, although it's only a small part of the episode. But it also tells you a lot about number six's personal life. So we probably learn more about number six in that episode than we do any other episode. And I love The Girl Who Was Deaf just because it's great fun. It's like a drugged up version of the Avengers, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And I like that it's also kind of spoofing secret agents a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Very much.
Danger Man.
Yeah, absolutely. There's Danger Man nods in the episode. There's nods to Bond in the episode. There's been a couple of Goldfinger references, like with the when he's got the fishbowl over his head or whatever. No, it's great fun. But I think they're both episodes are great fun. Great kind of fantasy TV episodes. Again, you could remove them from The Prisoner and The Prisoner would still be what it is. But I still like them all the same.
But Children in the Village, that was interesting.
Yeah, because you wonder whose children are they?
Yeah, exactly.
There are obviously people in the village who have been there all their lives. We know there are married couples in the village because we see that on occasion. So, unless people are sterilised, they're going to mate. Do those kids then grow up only knowing the village? Is this like North Korea? Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. Then we get to final two. I thought Once Upon a Time was absolutely brilliant. The staging, McGoohan's direction, the acting, the camera angles. it was like a wonderfully orchestrated play. It was so good.
Yeah, it's theatre for the small screen, isn't it? And I can't think of any TV episode which has the same intensity. I mean, you probably know that in real life, Leo McKern did suffer a nervous breakdown during the filming of that episode and became quite ill. Such was the intensity that the two men gave the performance. It is an astonishing 50 minutes of television. And it was actually Patrick McGoohan's wife's favourite episode as well. Really interesting to think that it was the sixth one to be filmed, and then it was just held over until, to be the penultimate episode in the end. It's a wonderful piece of television, and I'd recommend anybody to watch that.
Now, Fallout, the ending, I know that he only wrote it in 36 hours because he didn't really know how to end the series. And it's not one of my favorite endings of any series. However, you mentioned it when he gives his speech and he starts with I, and he's drowned out by the men in the white hoods, and they all have different signs: pacifists, hawks. I mean, it was really interesting to have all these cross section of different, basically standings or thought processes, and I really appreciated that part of it. And it was when he unmasked number one and he sees himself. Jane Rowe on your site wrote about a body double, and one theory I have that is probably not true in my mind, but I was just kicking it around, that number one was from an alternate universe, and he had resigned, and he wanted to see what this number six, why he resigned, and he came into our universe. But I'm kind of going off the deep end there a little.
No, as I said at the beginning, there is no right or wrong answer to what Fallout and The Prisoner is all about. If someone wants to come along and say, oh, it's all about bakers baking bread, they're not wrong to say that, because that's their own personal interpretation. Fallout, you either love it, you're indifferent, or you hate it. I love it. I think it's a work of genius. McGoohan himself said, how else could he have ended it? And I agree with him. Any other ending, any sort of Bond-style ending where they whip off the mask and it's, oh, I'm the bad guy, it wouldn't have worked.
Yeah.
I think the allegorical nature of, you're your own worst enemy, and that you're all your own number one, I think is absolutely perfect for what The Prisoner was trying to tell us and for what McGoohan was trying to teach us, if you like, about the world around us. I think it's the perfect ending, but I totally get why other people aren't satisfied with it. To me, it just resonated with me. If it doesn't resonate with other people, that's absolutely fine. Like I said, there's no right or wrong. I'm not right. McGoohan's not right necessarily, and you're not wrong. Everybody is right if they have an interpretation as to what it means. The important thing about The Prisoner is that you take something from it. As long as you take something from it and think a moral good has come because you watched it.
It hits on all the themes, and like we imprisoned ourselves, and what you mentioned when they're back in London and the door opens up and the butler goes in and the door sounds exactly like the one in the village. I mean, that's it. The episode to me is steeped deeply in allegory and not to be taken at face value, because
absolutely, you have to read into every moment. But I think the overall message of that scene at the end is that even if you think you escaped your own prison, you really haven't. Yeah. We're all prisoners of the world that we've built around us.
And before we go, I noticed something in The Girl That Was Death. There's a photographer taking pictures, and it looks like Alexis Canner.
It is. He actually appears twice in that episode. He's the photographer in the fairground. But if you remember at the start of the episode, Mr. X gets his orders, a bit like Mission Impossible, from a vinyl record in the record shop. Yeah. And there's a voice saying, oh, you must meet up with the Colonel, or whatever it is. That voice is also Alexis Canner. So he has two parts in The Girl of Death. He's the voice in the record booth and he's the photographer. So, yes, he appears 4 times in the series.
Yeah, amazing. Very talented. And I know that McGoohan was impressed with him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have used him.
Absolutely.
But, what a pleasure to talk to you about this. And we could have gone very deeply into those episodes. But I just, it was kind of like a primer. And if you want to do this again and get a little deeper, well, I'd be more than happy. That'd
I'd
be
love
great.
to. You can never tire of talking about The Prisoner.
No.
So feel free to invite me again, and I'll absolutely be there.
All right. I will take you up on that. All right. Thanks again, Rick. I so appreciate it. And again, a great series that has me thinking to this very day.
Yeah, I hope that people listening will give it a try and write in and tell us what they think.
An intriguing series that keeps me and a lot of other people guessing. For those who have never seen it, I hope you will, as it is more timely, in my opinion, now than it was when it was produced in the 60s. Some of it's dated, but the themes of individuality and freedom are timeless. Rick will join me again as we take a deep dive. Plus, I hope to invite others to chat about this fascinating series. I wouldn't mind him making kind of an ongoing series here at Sci-Fi Talk as well. And on sci-fi-talk.com, if you listen to the series there, because there's a player I have there, there's a bonus video of a videotape of Scott Appel, who we mentioned in the interview. His viewing order of The Prisoner is there, and also a video playlist with his insightful introductions and wrap-ups of the intriguing 17 episodes. So check all that out. Sci-Fi Talk Plus is a great place to hear episodes like this without any interruption whatsoever. And you also get it early, and their episodes are also uncensored. There's videos, like my recent Behind the Curtain series that was popular on YouTube is now exclusive to Plus, and the latest episode is on the film Companion. Trailers and Clips has the latest trailers from Captain America Brave New World, the recently released Jurassic World Rebirth, and also Fantastic Four First Steps. Jurassic World was actually released the same day it came out, that Wednesday. I look to do that with every trailer and when they drop. That's part of what this site is, a multimedia experience. And it's not expensive. Click on the link in the show notes for a low locked-in price of only 99 cents per month. And not to mention a 1-year free trial. And you can cancel at any time. There's no penalties. You can leave whenever you like, but I'm working hard to keep you there as long as possible. Be seeing you. This is Tony Talado.